Now take this opportunity to introduce our most dignified speaker, Rosa Dickett-Miller, who is an assistant professor at Austria. Ma'am specialized in sports pedagogy, didactics, gender diversity studies, and health promotion. She is the vice president of IPASCOE from 2017 to 21, chair of the ICSP Committee of Sport Pedagogy, vice president of the OSG, Austrian Association for Sports Science, chair sport pedagogy, member of the scientific advisory board of the Front for Forum Being Unsport, Austrian Women Forum Physical Education. She was the co-founder of the Austrian platform Front M Sport Platform Women in Sports, member of the scientific advisory board of 100% Sport, member of the Austrian Steering Group on Gender Equality, chair of the Working Group of Prevention of Sexual Harassment in Sport, Gender-Based Violence in Sport, member of the European Expert Pool on Sexual Violence in Sport since 2018. Her partnership in several European projects were Erasmus Plus Project Cases 2019-2021, Erasmus Plus Project Voice for Truth and Dignity, Combating Sexual Violence in European Sport through Voices of Those Affected, SMS Sports Media Stereotypes, and also Aging and Physical Activity, Lena, Impala, also Gender-Based Violence in Sport. She conducts several nationally funded projects in the area of gender equality or promotion of women and girls in sport. Kindergarten, physical activity for girls and boys in outdoor areas of kindergarten, schoolyards and gender relation, Vogo's women's sport goes school in different sports, sexual harassment, discrimination sport, gender training for coaches. Furthermore, she is a member of several editorial boards currently for the Austrian Journal for the female PE teachers, girls in physical education since 2001. Ma'am, indeed, it's a great honor for us to have such an eminent personality who is specializing in a very rare area and rendering a great service for humanity. On behalf of the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, Government of India, Khelo India, a warm welcome to our most dignified speaker, Rosa Dickett-Miller. Ma'am, welcome. I also would like to welcome Professor Darlene Kluka, Professor Rosa, Madam Beatrice, Dr. G. Kishore, and all my dear PE teachers to this program. It's a very rare and a very unique program, session which you're going to have today, a very important session. So once again, a warm welcome to one and all. Over to you, Rosa ma'am, for your session.
Thank you, Usha, for this nice introduction. Thank you, India, for this nice support. It's always a pleasure being here and joining. Do you see the presentation? You can see it? Let's have a look.
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet, okay.
You could share the screen, please.
Now you can see?
Yes, yes.
Yes, that's good. Hopefully it works. Okay. Susan, yeah, good afternoon, namaste. It's a great pleasure for me being here in India or here in Austria and in India as well. Thanks for the introduction and inviting me to this outstanding seminar with so many people from over the world coming here digitally to India. I'm really very pleased and honored. And just to let you know, I'm coming from Vienna, the capital from Austria. It's a very small country in the middle of Europe. We have just 9 million inhabitants. That's really a small group in comparison to India. And I was asked to talk about a very serious topic which occurs in sports as well, and its consequences in safeguarding in sport. And as a member of the European Expert Pool on Sexual Harassment in sport, I try to focus in my presentation in sports on the following issues. Okay. On the one hand, I'd like to start with myths and focus on safeguarding and protecting in sport and bring some definitions, clarifications, The main part will be on standards for safeguarding children in sport and also in PE. That's an issue as well. Before I'm coming to models of good practice and projects which are running in the European context or on the international level. And finally, I'll bring some useful resources where you can have a look at. Okay, there is a number of misconceptions related to the issue of harassment and abuse in sports. And crucial to safeguarding athletes, it's recognizing that sports organizations need safeguarding policies and procedures in place. And in the following, I'd like to bring some quotes and sentences and ask you to think after this about if they're false and true. And it is known that it's incumbent upon all stakeholders in sports both to adopt general principles for safe sports and to implement and monitor policies and procedures for safe sport, which state that all athletes have a right to be treated with respect, protected from non-accidental violence. This is from the IOC consensus statement on harassment and abuse in sport, which was renewed in 2016 and is the basis for the next discussions. Coming to the myth. I'd like to bring some comments and you should think about if they are true for you or false. And if you think about if this is an issue in sport, lots of people say in sport this does not occur. But if you have a look on different studies, in the meantime, then harassment and abuse occur in sport. There are numerous well-recognized benefits of sport participation. All of us know it's health promotion, it's confidence for people, it's fun, it's very high valued. On the other hand, there is evidence, and this evidence indicates that harassment and abuse occurs in all sports and at all levels. This may be compounded by a lack of regulatory policies and procedures in sports organizations. And this is also the issue why we are focusing very much on these policies and procedures, because if there are procedures, and this is also well evaluated through studies, if there are procedures and policies, it's less likely that cases occur. So especially as you may think about the situation of the Me Too social media campaign, this was renewed, this has renewed the awareness of the widespread problem of sexual harassment and assault in different fields of society. It was in October 2017 when the American actress Alyssa Milano posted a tweet encouraging survivors of sexual harassment and assault to post at the Me Too as a status update. And that short tweet sparked a global movement, and since then, the Me Too campaign has gained international visibility, a visibility that has been largely attributed to the viral fashion in which stories of sexual abuse have spread on digital media platforms. So the hashtag is currently circulating in over 85 countries and more, and has thus significantly expanded beyond the global north and the initial impetus for Milano's tweet, namely revelations concerning movie mogul Harvey Weinstein's years of sexual abuse. So famous actresses and politicians took the lead, but also athletes followed the example. And the result was a tremendous number of affected persons telling their stories about sport publicly, but also critique and questions occurred why affected persons did not react earlier or tell their stories earlier. And beside Alyssa Milano reacted on this tweet, also other groups in sports reacted. It was Michaela Maroney, and she was a multiple gold medal awarded gymnast and repeatedly molested by a national team doctor. And Michaela Maroney told that people should know it's not just happening in Hollywood, it's happening everywhere, and wherever there is a position of power, there seems to be a potential for abuse. She had a dream to go to the Olympics, and the things that she had to endure to get there, she told were unnecessary and disgusting. And she posted this tweet in Me Too, and an avalanche was rolling on after this comment. And as you may also have heard, it was, Larry Nassar. He was an American, he is the American convicted sex offender from USA gymnast, national team doctor. He was also professor at Michigan State University. And Nassar's cumulative sexual assault crimes were the basis of the USA gymnast sex abuse scandal, which began in 2015, and in which he was accused of assaulting at least 250 or 260 young women and girls, dating back to 1992. And his victims included numerous Olympic and United States women's national gymnastics team gymnasts, and he admitted to 10 of those accusations. Nassar was sentenced to 60 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to child pornography charges. He was sentenced to 175 years in prison after pleading guilty to 7 counts of sexual assault of minors, and to 40 to 125 years in prison after pleading guilty to an additional 3 counts of sexual assaults. This was a big discussion after this case, and not only in the US, I would say all over the world. And on the other hand, it was important having cases like this, thinking about how we could prevent abuse, we could prevent sexual harassment, we could prevent from other forms of discrimination within groups. And in this case, it was helpful to implement new strategies. Another sentence, if it's right or false, is harassment and abuse do not occur in my sport. As you may think, of course, this is a false sentence because it can occur in my sport as well. And the study by Carrie Fasting and colleagues already in 2004 demonstrates that harassment and abuse occurs in all sports, and that assumptions about the risk of sexual harassment being higher in some sports than others lead not only to distorted stereotypes, but also to incorrectly targeted policies for harassment-free sports. So there is no sport which is harassment-free or not. It could occur in each sport if there are power relations and if there is an atmosphere which does not allow to speak up if there is anything not okay or not right. Harassment and abuse in sport only occur in certain countries. As we've heard about the case in US and some other countries, there is, of course, this is of course a false sentence, because a number of studies have demonstrated that harassment and abuse occur in sport worldwide. There are studies from Western countries, US, Canada, Australia, the European countries, starting again in evaluating the situations, but also in other countries all over the world. Studies start on this issue, looking at the situation in sports clubs or sports settings and asking if there is a possibility or if there are settings which could be difficult in terms of this in terms of this issue. The question, if we have never had a reported case of harassment and abuse, this issue doesn't concern us. We very often hear, if we are speaking with the presidents of our sports organizations, to say maybe it's the case with the gymnasts, but it's not in track and field or something like this. Of course, there have been, if there is no reported case of harassment and abuse, it could be good, but it does not necessarily mean that it has never occurred or it's not possible there. There is a study of Kirby et al. That who noted that if effective harassment policies are not in place, cases of maltreatment may not only be underreported, but maybe also be less likely to be investigated, or if there is an atmosphere where it's not normal to speak on problems, then nobody would tell something. And sometimes it's also an atmosphere of fear or an atmosphere of high dependence, so that you're very dependent on the authorities of the organization. Then it would be also very difficult to speak and to tell if there is anything not okay. And it starts with small things and signs. Harassment and abuse is not a problem for elite athletes. Of course, also a sentence which is false, because studies have demonstrated an increased risk of harassment and abuse at the highest performance level, because athletes are very interested in getting further, have very high goals in, for example, going to Olympics, going to international competitions, being a star. And they're more likely to accept things which are not okay, because only the hardest survive and only the hardest worker have a chance to get to the highest positions. They are more likely, because they're dependent from different persons, to go to the competitions, to get a place in the team, that they are more likely to accept things which they normally would not accept. Sometimes they also don't have so much time to think about, because they have one goal, and this is getting good positions in sport. So this is not to say, however, that elite athletes are not, but this is not to say that only elite sports are the only one at risks. Another case, as you can maybe see in the next sentence, which is asking for athlete safeguarding should concern everyone working in sport, also the officials, the trainers, maybe the parents as well, staffs working in sport organizations. This is okay. Everyone involved in organized sport shared the responsibility to adhere to the principle of safe sport through best practice and implementation of policies and safeguarding policies. So it's important that the whole system and all the persons within the system should be aware of this issue, should have open eyes, should look clearly into situations and looking how the setting is working, how coaches, trainers, teachers are speaking, behaving with children and with their athletes. And if everybody has open eyes, then it's much less likely that the case occurs. So as we will see later in the presentation, harassment and abuse are embedded into a system which allows and offers a field of harassment. And so it's important that all the people working there do not ignore signs, especially also of unbalanced power relations. Elite athletes with impairment have a lower risk of harassment and abuse. Some could think about that this could be true. There are also a number of studies and research which indicates that athletes with disabilities have an increased risk of abuse compared to their able-bodied counterparts. There are many reasons for it. One reason has to do with the daily care needs of some, for example, para-athletes and in trying to meet those needs, roles and responsibilities among the athletes entourage can become blurred, increasing the risk of maltreatment, and the situations of dependence is quite higher, and therefore the risk is higher as well. So data on sexual violence in sport, for example, in European situation, it's told that 1 out of 5 athletes has experienced some form of sexualized violence in sport. This could be physically, this could be in a mental way, in a psychological way, this could be in times of jokes, touches, so the whole variety is included. And 1 out of 3 German squad athletes has experienced some form of sexualized violence in sport. And 1 out of 9 German athletes experienced severe sexual violence, such as sexual assault or rape. So the numbers are quite high. At the moment, there is a European study running exactly this week, looking for prevalence data in the whole sports society. It will be interesting maybe next year to have the new data. In society, there are also different quotas. 1 out of 4 girls or 1 out of 6 boys will have been sexually abused with their 18th birthday. These are high numbers. As I've heard from India, I'm not sure if the data are right, but there are numbers told in the media that 7 out of 10 girls experience sexual violence, or 90% have experienced any forms of sexual violence. So as we can see here, the issue is a global phenomenon which has to be addressed in society in general and in sports and sports organization as well. So sports is not excluded from this issue and has the responsibility. As we say, this is an important field for young people, adolescents, and we bring them to a better living. Then we have to address this issue as well. It's not an easy task, it's a difficult issue. It's not easy also to start speaking on this issue within the sports organizations, but it's necessary to have the focus on it if you want to get more people in. Maybe an information on the report from Darling, Pope, Mooney, King and Ablett of 2020 about child sexual abuse in sports. This is a truth project and a thematic report, very interesting for all of those to read, to have a look at it, because it includes also examples of persons telling the story. So safeguarding and protecting children and athletes in sports. Let's come to some definitions of it. What is safeguarding? So if you want to bring in the issue, then it's not the best to say we have sexual violence in sport and we have to work on it. Sometimes it's easier to convince organizations to speak about safeguarding. It's more positive and it's an easier approach to start with. And coming to the term, safeguarding refers to the process of protecting children and adults as well, to provide safe and effective care, because sports organizations, for example, in Austria, as they're publicly funded by government money, so they have to fulfill safe concerns and effective care. And this process includes all procedures which are designed to prevent harm to a child. So what is child protection? This is a part of the safeguarding process, and it aims to protect individual children which are identified as suffering or likely to suffer significant harm. And child protection procedures should detail how to respond to concerns about the child. So if there are signs that children have maybe problems, they have to be taken seriously. What is abuse? It's a totally different term. Child abuse is any form of physical, emotional, or sexual mistreatment, or also the lack of care that leads to injury or harm. So if, for example, in Austria, we have a law in sports organization, if a coach realizes that any other person does not take care for a child within the sport organization, it's also the task of them to react. So commonly it occurs within a relationship of trust or responsibility, and is an abuse of power or a breach of trust. So power situations and power relations is the main important aspect behind this. And abuse can happen to a child regardless of the age, regardless of gender, regardless of race or ability. So in former times, the view was very often, and the focus was often on women and girls. If we take data seriously from, for example, from Norway, northern countries, then it's the boys as well which are at risk. The situation is that they, because of their masculinity issues, it's not common to speak about it. It's not common to speak about problems, or it's not common to be in a power situation and where they're at the lower level of power. So it may be that they have similar numbers or amounts of injuries, harms, abuses, but they don't. It's much more difficult for them to talk about or to tell somebody about it. There are 4 main types of child abuse. It's physical, it's sexual, it could be emotional, and it could be neglect. And in addition, there is bullying or poor practice as well. And what do we know about abusers? They are usually known and trusted persons, and then normally known and trusted by the family of the children as well. It does not mean that they have to be adults. And there are, of course, much more male than female, but not necessarily. We have also some cases of female offenders. There could also be young people, the peer group. It could be family members. It could be someone the child encounters in a residential setting or in the community, including sports or leisure activities. And an individual may abuse or neglect a child directly, or may be responsible for the abuse because they fail to prevent another person's. So it's the whole system, could be the whole system which could be included, and makes it necessary to have a look at it. How does this process run? And it's known as the grooming process, and there are difficult stages which at the end allows offenders much more easily to for exploitation or sexual exploitation, and it's the process to prepare or train someone for a particular purpose or activity. So when a person, whether male or female, plays with someone's feelings in order to gain control of the other person, that process is called grooming, and the groomer wants to prepare the person or victim for some type of behavior that will benefit the groomer's selfish goals or personal gain. And there are normally 6 to 9, depends on the literature. We have here 6 stages. The first stage is targeting victim, and the person targets a victim, and victims have some noticeable vulnerability. So there is some emotional neediness, there is maybe low self-confidence, but it could be also you and me who is the victim as well. In the second stage, this is the phase of gaining trust, and the offender is trying to obtain information about the victim. And this is a key point, because in this process, this can be through conversations, maybe small gifts. This could be done through casual conversations with the victim or the parents, to get information, to get confidence at the parents' level as well. In the third stage, the offender tries to be the person who fills the specific need of the athlete, of the child. In this information gained allows the trafficker to fill a need in the victim's life, making the victim dependent on them in some way, buying gifts, being their friend, being a love relationship, or buying soft drugs, offering specific training conditions and materials. Before, in the fourth stage, the person starts to isolate the victim, to get control and loyalty of the person, to isolate the child from the other athletes, from their friends, from their families, begins to create times to be alone with the victim, and the offender begins to play a major role in the victim's life and attempts to distance them from their trustful surroundings. So this person is the only one, and the only one in trust at the one hand. And after this stages, abuses begins, or sexual contact begins claiming maybe that there could be a service needed or must be repaid, demand sex, and at the end the person tries to maintain control and have the power of this person. And as you can see in this grooming process, maybe the first steps are normal steps, speaking with persons, try to get a trust person. So it's very often not easily to distinguish if there is another interest behind. So one aspect is always to have a look at that in situations there are situations where other people, other athletes are in the situation as well. Always having a view on 6 eyes, for example, not only coach and athlete, but another athlete or another coach as well. So avoid situations where there are just 2 persons. Be transparent in all your processes of coaching. Try to focus on rules, on situations, how to deal with overnight situations, how to deal with transport situations, how to deal with coaching situations. Is it possible that parents appear in the coaching training situation all the time? Is there a feedback system available? Is there a position? Is there a possibility that the athletes speak about problems or comment if there are problems in coaching situations? So all these processes could help to break this grooming process and stop this process. So knowing these grooming process procedures, the most important aspect for organizations as systems is important to have standards for safeguarding and protecting children in sports. In the literature, at the meantime, you can find a lot of informations. In the following, I'd like to focus on sports, on Sport England, which have very nice material on child protection in sport units, standards for safeguarding and protecting children in sport. There is a national group working together. In the beginning, the NCPCC Child Protection in Sport Unit was established to work with sport organizations together to provide and support and advise developing children protection policies and procedures. They were they had implemented a steering group which was looking about how to implement it, how was it implemented, and to monitor the different procedures. In this, the benefits and purpose of the standards were very important because this child protection was implemented in a sports action plan, which was published, and there was an extensive consultation because the important thing is to highlight the benefits of standards. Also, if you want to work with organizations, bring in what could be their benefit doing so and implementing it. And it was important there were benefits for children and young people because they won't experience abuse and harm, for the parents and carers, which can be sure that the children they give into sports organizations or can be sure that the organization takes care of this issue, takes care of the children, and recognizes standards and high-level professionalized work. It's also a benefit for those working in sport because if they can say we have standards, we have an action plan, we are looking that the standards are implemented and fulfilled, and so they can say yes, we look at it, and the organization themselves, for them it's important that this is a well-known, recognized organization with high professional standards. So this could help to create a safe sporting environment. This is crucial for children and young people. It protects them from harm. It provides a benchmark to assist those involved in sport to make informed decisions, and it promotes good practice and challenge practices. That is important for the children. So having national benchmarks, very important, and showing what is the benefit for doing so. There are important principles which guide all these standards and measurements. One is that children and young people have a right to enjoy sport, free from all forms of abuse and exploitation. United Nations charters, all of these very important regulations and rights are focusing on it, and sport has to do it as well. There is a right for children to enjoy safe sport. What is important as well is that all children and young people have equal rights to protection from harm, and all children and people should be encouraged to fulfill their potential, and inequality should be challenged. So regardless the age, sex, social class, castes, as it is called in India, have a look at these inequalities with which children are born or socialized in sport should not be a field where this should be prolonged, but it should be a field where this is irrelevant and all get chances being involved. On the very important principle is that everybody in sport, in the sport organization, in school, has the responsibility to support the care and protection, and sport organizations have a duty of care on children and young people who take part in sport. So, for example, in Austria there is a law that all persons involved in sports organizations have the duty to do so if they know, even if they just know about or if they hear about it, they have the duty to react and to work for the safety for the children. So what are the standards? There are 10 standards which are developed and should be implemented. I'd like to go through these 10 standards in the following, and starting with the policy. So any organization providing services or activities for children and young people under the age of 18 should have a child protection policy. This is a statement of intent that demonstrates a commitment to safeguard children involved in sport from harm. For example, in Austria, we started in 2015 to develop this policy, and the working group said if the minister itself does not sign it, it doesn't make sense working further on it, because it has to be top down. The minister, the heads of the organizations have to be aware that the policy is necessary. To start with, this policy shows that the organization, that the state is taking its duty of care seriously. So questions you could ask in your organizations, and this is the point where you can start with, even if you're a school director or in a sport organization, do we have a safeguarding child protection policy? If not, try to start one. Does it prioritize the welfare of children? Is the policy clear and easy to understand? If it's not easy, nobody will take care about. Is the policy published effectively? And is there a process for dealing with concerns? Is there a group who is working on it, who is discussing this paper? So make sure that there is a policy in place, there is a policy developed, and the main important stakeholders do support this policy. The second standard is that procedures and systems because they provide clear step-by-step guidance on what to do in different circumstances. It clarifies the roles and responsibilities in lines with communication, and they make clear, the systems ensure that procedures are implemented and information is offered. So if you're a president of an organization, you can ask, is it clear what to do if there are concerns about the child? So if you have a case in your organization, does everybody know what to do? Is there a guidance, maybe on social media, texting, emailing, photography, what to do? Can everybody access the child protection procedure? If the coaches don't know, if the parents don't know, if the teachers don't know, then if it's not published visibly, then if it's not accessible, then it's difficult to react in this case. Is there a designated safeguarding person in the organization? So the second step in our Austrian action plan was to implement in each federal organization a person who is responsible for the issue in former times of sexual violence in sport. Now for prevention of violence in sport, now we changed the name because it has more duties in safeguarding officers in the different organizations. It's also not an easy task to convince organizations to implement these positions, because then you have to educate and coach as well. Question is there a are complaints about abusive behavior dealt with effectively? So after having procedures and operating systems, the third standard is the one of prevention. Measures to help minimize the possibility of children and young people being abused by those in a position of trust is important. And it's important to prevent abuse by putting safeguards in place as an important measurement for prevention. Other procedures for recruiting people working with children. So in Austria, we started having criteria for coaches criteria for the staff working in sports organization, and do these persons working with children fulfill this criteria? Are there clear ways to raise concerns about unacceptable behavior by staff volunteers, but also by children? If there is peer violence, for example, also how to work together, how to behave in a sport club could be important. Are there plans how to deal with situations for trips and transporting children? Do you ensure the children are always supervised when you provide activities, especially important for the parents? We also have criteria to bring criminal records, obligatorily safeguarding checks. We're working on issues that all coaches and staff members have to fulfill self-declarations, how they will work in a sports organization. Coming to exactly this point, codes of practice or codes of behavior, these codes of practice set a clear benchmark of what is acceptable. So everybody knows what is acceptable, what not. They help to minimize opportunities for abuse and to help to prevent unfounded allegations. So it's not 100% assurance, but the level is much higher, or the barriers for offenders are much higher in organizations who have this codes of practice and behavior, who know that there is someone looking at the behavior of offenders. So do you have a code of ethics? Is a guidance available on expected standards of behavior? Is there a guidance also on expected behavior of children towards other children? So have a look at what are children in the shower room. Are there processes of excluding others, how they're dealing together? And to senior management, ensure children are listened and respected. So also give the children a voice, give them a voice to speak, to be as sensitive as others. An important issue, and why also organizations like PESCIV is so focused on this issue as well, is the equity aspect, because all these measures and standards have to ensure the needs of all children and young people, and to set steps to combat discriminations as well. So they have to ensure that all children have a chance. And is your safeguarding policy clear that all children have equal rights to being protected regardless age, race, class, gender, and so on? And are staff and volunteers supported to recognize and respond to additional vulnerability of some children? For example, children with disabilities. What about them? How do children speak together? What is our codes of conduct that are clearly that discriminatory, violent behavior is unacceptable, and what to do in situations like this? And are these complaints procedures fair and open to challenge? So an important issue to that organizations should take steps to combat these discriminations and actively include all children and young people in their safeguarding measures. Communication. Without communication, all these good things and ideas and standards won't be effective, because standards and procedures are only effective if people are aware of them. They have some ownership of them. They're included in, for example, developing the standards or thinking about how to live the standards in their own organization, have the opportunity to express their views on how they're working. So is the organization openly committed to safeguarding? Are people aware of their rights to be safe from abuse? Do children know that there are safe safeguarding regulation standards? Do the parents know about which rights they have, which rights children have? So also young people and parents know where to go for help if there are some concerns. Is there information policy? Is this information clear for everyone to understand? Or does everybody know who to contact if they have concern? Who is the person of trust in an organization? Who is the person for different topics in an organization where they can go to? Therefore, you need education and training. The organizations have to provide trainings and development opportunities for staff and volunteers. For example, take the case of Austria again. At the moment, we have 65 federal sports organizations, and at the moment we are working hard to offer education for all of them. At the moment, we have 50 out of 65 organizations who have implemented a person in trust, a safeguarding officer, and we're continuously educating and training coaches at the first, and the persons with power, so in the organizations. So you have to ask in your process, is there an induction process for staff and volunteers in significant contact with children? Are all staff and volunteers provided with the relevant safeguarding training and information material? Are children provided with information where to go to, with flyers, with stickers, also on? And is support available if there are safeguarding concerns? So it's clear that coaches and officials in sports organizations are no safeguarding experts, but they should know after a first process how to deal with cases, where to go to, and where are the organizations which are specialists in this field. Which brings us to standard 8, the access to advice and support. Organizations have the duty to ensure advice and support, that they're in place to help the people. And you can ask questions. Do children have information about where to get help and support? Do those with designated roles have access to specialists' advice and information? Because in many cases, there are psychologists necessary to support. There are victims organizations, specialists necessary to solve the conflict, to solve the problems, or to help people who are traumatized maybe in this field. And is support available to individuals involved in an investigation or complaint? So you also need help for the complaint, the investigation, to have energy, to have support to survive this process as well, because this is such a very difficult process. Then the implementation and monitoring process, which should be checked, which should be implemented and monitored. And you can ask, what steps will be taken to safeguard children? Are resources available to help to implement these? Which regular reviews are in place? Are people and parents involved? And what about safeguarding concerns? Are they recorded, monitored? Is there a support available? And the last standard, very important, is if the actions taken by the organizations, how are they influencing, encouraging, promoting the adoption? What about the process of implementation? What about partner organizations, for example, sponsors? Are they convinced about the standards? And you should try to ask questions is the organization stance on safeguarding made clear to all partners? Does partnership funding and commissioning criteria include this requirement? For example, in Austria, the states' fundings are just available if organizations make clear that they have implemented a specific number of standards in safeguarding policies. If not, they get less money or no money. So another question could be, does the organization actively promote these principles with the partnerships? Does the organization provide signpost safeguarding support and resources to partner organizations? So important to this aspect is that the organization is promoting the issues actively into the public and the partner organizations as well. So and you can ask afterwards, are the standards in place? Are they proposed? Are they not in place? And which actions are planned to start to get these measurements and actions in place? I've told you the standards, criteria, which are very important. Now have a look at models of good practice and projects. A very important toolkit which could be used, there are others as well, is the IOC toolkit for international federations and national Olympic committees on safeguarding athletes from harassment and abuse in sports, with all the standards I presented to you, but also with examples of good practice, which problems could occur when you want to implement it, which solutions they found in finding a way to change the situation and to get these procedures implemented. In the context of Europe, there is, in the Council of Europe, the group EPAS, with a project running child safeguarding in sport. Up your game, strengthen your squad. And at the moment, they try to guide and to monitor the process in different of implementation of these standards in different countries all over Europe. Austria is part of this project, and we realized that it helps us being member of an European project, because we can say Europe is interested in doing so, and Austria has to do it as well, because we're a very modern and professional country. So it's easier for us to having a shift from the European Union, Council of Europe, that these tasks have to be implemented and to be fulfilled. And you can always argue if also the Football Association and FIFA takes this task seriously, then it's a good task for a country, for the sport organization as well. And they also have developed a toolkit quite similar to the one from the IOC. And it's important, it's up to us to have child safeguarding regulations in place. Just to give you an overview over the design, that you can recognize it if you see it. They focused on 5 principles and 5 steps to get as policy into practice as well. Or what could be interesting for you as well is are the results of a European project on voice. It was the idea that hearing the voices for truth and of those being affected or having experienced abuse, harassment, could be important for convincing stakeholders to start working on this issue. And in this project, which was realized in 7 to 8 European countries, we did interviews with persons being affected, heard their voices, interviewed them to the stories, and identified typical types of stories which were occurring in sport. And as a result, we developed educational films and with additional educational material. So have a look at these links. Here the stories, different stories, and you can use the stories for your teaching, because you get information how to use the story, which information could be necessary to teach the stories, to use the stories in your teaching, in your coaching programs, and you get information on good practice guides as well. In the preparation of this talk today and the talk earlier, I was looking that recognized that there are also different examples in India as well. For example, a colleague from the karate field of karate was looking at was trying to develop programs for girls and self-defense. Self-defense is one possibility to deal with sexual violence, but it's a small part, but it's important for girls to know they have materials, they have ideas, they have the power to defend. This could be physically, but it also can be emotionally in words, in discussion as well. And it was I hope it's right, Tilanganas. It was the first fighter, I don't know if it's right, in 2013. And she was trying to work with this issue with girls against sexual violence. And there is Yuva School got the L'Oreal Sport for a good award. And it's a project in Jharkhand to support girls through sport on a broader level as athletes, as coaches, but also via school education to empower the girls being aware for this issue. I hope I could bring you some basics and some examples. Finally, there are some resources. I'm sure Usha will distribute this material for you that you can have a look at it and read at it. And I'm thankful that you joined the session. And if you have a question, I think there will be a discussion at the end. Thank you for joining. And I hope I did it, translate it in the right way. The internet did it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rosa. Indeed, it was a great, it was such an informative session and a very useful session. Over to you, Amal.
I don't hear you.
Thank you, madam, for the wonderful session. Actually, I'm having with 2 questions for you. Madam, as you said, harassment and abuse are happening in almost in every field. Madam, in case of kids studying in kindergarten and primary classes, they are also sexually harassed by elders or teachers. But the problem is those children are not yet in a stage to realize that they got harassed or abused. In such cases, how can we prevent these kind of issues? That is the first question. One more.
That we do later. First, Amal, you can take one by one.
Okay. Madam, please.
So if I understood you right, the question was how could we do preventions in the field of small children?
Kindergarten, especially in kindergarten children.
Yeah. The thing is that it's necessary to teach ongoing teachers as well. That the sensibility for this issue is on a high level, and you have to think about how you communicate with children, how to empower them, that if there is something not okay, that they find words for speaking about, because the difficult thing is that most of the children and people don't have words for it, because there are maybe, you don't speak about your body or specific body sensations, and the more openly it's possible to speak about bodies, about feelings, about how people touch one another, what is okay and what is not okay. And at the end, this is a change to further decades, I would say. You have start speaking on this as early as possible. It's not easy, and also the kindergarten pedagogues and teachers also have to learn to do this as well, because they haven't learned it themselves. But the more openly and the more transparent you can speak on body sensations, feelings, what is okay, what is not okay, the more likely it is that if there is something really not okay, they have a way to find a person. And the second thing is that they need persons of trust where they could go to. But the problem is that very often offenders are those who play the trust person in the first stages. And so this is the difficult place. That's why the whole organization has to have open eyes.
Okay, thank you, madam. The next question. In India, we face the same one. In case of elder victims, most of them are not willing to share their issues with, maybe because they feel shame or they are afraid to share with others. Madam, how can we boost their confidence to turn up with their problems to the concerned authority?
It's nearly the same answer as before. But what we were doing, because it was proposed from European Commission and the standards, is also to offer courses for the children, that they have a place where to learn, speak about, and to make clear it's not their problem. The problem are the offenders and the other people who do these things. And if you make this clear that this could happen to all the children, and it's no shame on the person who has to experience this, but the problem are the others. And if you make this clear and combining with learning words for speaking about it, for example, there are small videos where children, trick videos where children can see it in a comic, for example, what their rights are, how they could speak about it, and it's not their fault, it's the others who are the problem. Then they can learn it. It's no way from today and tomorrow the problem is solved. It needs a culture, how to do it on a daily basis, and maybe in courses you can speak with the children. But you have to make clear, it's not, if you just make courses for children and trainings for children, this doesn't solve the problem. Because the responsibility has to be is the organization, the coaches which are in place, the officials who organize the coaches, the officials who control the professional standards, code ethics, and something like this. It's responsibility of the organization, and they have to provide the safety places. The children can be empowered, but it's not their task to have a look at all the things which are not okay.
Thank you, madam. Over to you, Usha, madam.
And there was one more question, Amal. Could you just see? This one more question from Srimati. It's how can we safeguard children while traveling in school bus from school to home? Is there any tips from that? I think it's in the chat box.
Yeah, this as you can see, the topic doesn't stop at the end of the sport club. It's the whole society who has to change and have to have a look at it. At the end, those who organize the school bus, for example, Also the bus driver, also the parents, and also the children have to know which behavior is okay and which behavior is not okay, because it's not only there are not only problems between coaches and athletes, but also within children. And it's an atmosphere of how could I say? It's the atmosphere, how they communicate together, how they exclude different persons due to their body or due to their race or gender or social class, or if they have money or not, or the clothes they wear. So it's the way how communication within a group is organized, and all together we have to work that this is getting more fair and touching the standards of good communication. Difficult task will take, I would say, all over the world, longer.
Thank you, Rosa. Over to you, Darlin, Professor Darlin Klukan.
You have done, Rosa, a great job of putting this issue into some understandable format for all of us to take as a foundation, and first of all, learn much more about it, and then see how these kinds of things can apply to for all of us to do better, that we can all do better. And as young people, I think the hardest thing is for them to, if something happens, the hardest thing is for them to realize that it's not their fault and they didn't lead the person on. This Dr. Nasser that was in our country here, they've looked to see who all is responsible for this, you know, and there were little breadcrumbs that were dropped from every organization, every person. They all saw something, but they either didn't think to link what they saw to a possibility of something really terrible happening, or they decided, oh, it's not my job, not my job. And so even though these things are difficult, we've absolutely got to come forward. And I think you all would be surprised as to who has had these kinds of experiences and have turned out to be wonderful human beings as adults, but that depending upon, again, the perception of the incidents and the direction that the person took after that, that makes a lot of difference. So again, I applaud you for taking this head on, and you've done wonderful things in Europe. I hope that cultures in the world do not get in the way of valuing boys and girls and women's and men's bodies in a similar fashion. Sometimes what works for us is if we're having a conversation and we're talking with men and boys, the question will always be, at least from me, do you have any sisters or wives or girlfriends or whatever? And what would you think if someone else did that to them? Trying to make it fit so that they can relate a little bit better to it. But there are some cultures, I won't say where, but we've had evidence where young girls are participating on teams, and part of the unwritten rule is if you want to participate, if you want to play, if you want to start, then you must have sex with the coach first. Those are difficult kinds of things to break down, because if there is a belief that that's okay, then that's a big challenge. But we all need to put this on our front burner, because part of what this is we have to be able to create safe environments for sport. And this is part of it. So thanks.
Thanks, Darlene. That's
Thanks, Darlene.
very good comment. And as you're really right, if you want to convince organizations and the heads of the organizations, asking what would this help your daughter or your sister or your wife, are the main aspects when they start thinking, oh, we have to do something. But we have to take care that we have to change the culture within the sports organizations as well. And it's not only the girls who are at risk, it's the boys as well. But through this culture, they're not very happy in talking about and in speaking about, because it devalues themselves, and that's not the culture, and it's not their interest as well. And there are so many problems if you speak up. There are so many problems for them afterwards, and they need a good system in supporting. Otherwise, it's really difficult in speaking up, because everybody is asking, is it true? The next question is, why you? What have you done that this has been the case? You're at risk losing your friends, because they think about whom to trust, and think about, if I want to get a star in sport, I need the coach. Also, the organizations at the end very often are more interested keeping the coach than losing one athlete. And the image of the organization where the case occurs it's difficult. So you need really a good system behind if you want to speak up. And it's our task to do this. But it's really difficult for persons. And that's why this is also the reason why so many people who had experiences don't speak up. Because if you think all these criteria, what could happen at the end, makes them thinking it's maybe better not to talk. So that's why it's so important that there are some strong persons who do so. And it's important to hear their voices and to take it seriously, because they are the initiative force to change situations. And if there is one, there are maybe more, and then it's easier to find support. But the task is at the organizations to change their culture and the rules and standards.
Thanks, Rosa. Thank you, Darlene. Professor Beatrice, please.
Okay, Rosa, thank you for your presentation. And I think that it's very important for us. And it's amazing how long in our history the person, men and women, took to react and tell the abuse in society. And of course, in sports, they were taught. And now we have some policies, equal rights, we think at least, and safeguard. It's very important for all of us to hear you. And having seen that you are studying for so many years this subject, and sometimes I think, what can you do in favor of this subject in more practical ways? I know that you have a lot of going on in Europe, in Austria, but I don't know in the world. And then I ask you, if you think that's possible, you and the Yapescovy team, to organize a campaign or a manifesto having part of the information and then part of the call to action to aware people on harassment and abuse in sport in different countries. You know, I think it's this campaign, you know, it's a kind of fashion, but it's important. And then these manifestos to just to have this call to action, and not to stay only writing books and papers, because people, they have to have access all the information that's going on in other countries. And I don't know the situation in Latin America. It's not real my field. I have following some of the subject here, and then some of the complaints and all of this. But I think it's important. That's my question. If you think that's possible, that we can organize this call for action or campaign, or I don't know what the name.
This would be a good option to hand over then to the other Rosa as well, because I think we always know what the others could do, but we could do it in our organization as well. Of course, the call for action, we have to think about whom to address and what to offer, but it's one of the core contents we have in our association, because violence starts with gender discrimination at the low level and ends at violence, and this is the continuum where we could deal on, and it would fit perfectly in our program as well. Rosa Lopez,
Thanks.
I'm sure she would make a comment on it.
Yeah, I request Rosa's remarks too, because she could answer the. Thanks, Beatrice, for this wonderful option. Call for action. Rosa, please. Rosa, ma'am, please.
Okay, thank you, Rosa. Thank you very much for bringing this topic, and particularly because it is a very sensitive topic. Honestly, we all know that it goes around, but you know, very few people address the issue in different perspective. Okay, now we have to say that if we check the numbers of femicide and mistreatment around the world, we would understand that this is also happening in sport, because sport is a cosmovision of the world and the society. So there are elements in there, and of course, we all regret and we are against any sort of mistreatment, okay, any sort of harassment. And we in Yapescabe, we have worked during all our history in order to challenge, to fight, to struggle against any sort of discrimination. But particularly looking at sexual harassment and the abuses that have come out, I think, and perhaps the last example that came, you know, open, that was the case of Nassar in the US, is like, it's an issue that of course made everybody be aware, because you were expecting that it wouldn't happen in places that supposedly there's good governance in every sense. So what does it show? That there is still, I mean, in society, in the culture, there are elements in there that there is someone who has a power or authority, then that one would try to push the other. And that's an issue that we have to be very careful about, because I mean, the situation of sexual harassment in sport could just not the relationship between coach and athlete. I mean, there are many in the atmosphere of sport organizations who can impact, who can abuse the other because they are in a higher position. Of course, children, I mean, we got to protect them because they know less. And there's a problem perhaps in education that we have to address. But then with elite sport, other elements comes out in terms of, should I speak, should I say, I won't be in the team, etc. And that can be manipulated by anyone. So it's a very, you know, sensitive topic, and how to address that. I don't think sport alone can do it. I think the campaign needs to come among several organizations within the country. So it has to be education, but it has to be public service. I mean, however it is called in each country. So it's not just from the sport field, but several institutions that form society that have to address this topic, because the problem of sexual violence, I mean, happens in any place. I mean, as they said in the bus, in any place that it happens. So then it cannot be just addressed from only one perspective. So education, definitely number one, has to be there. Sport component has to be there. Health component has to be there. We need to have sexual education in the sense in that kids know what is good and what is not, what is forbidden, what shouldn't be done, and how to respect ourselves. Because perhaps they have never seen that, and it happens. I mean, we believe so. I mean, we see, and in the media, there's so much information there that there are certain things that we know that they are not appropriate, but in the media it looks like they are. Okay, so that's another challenge that we have, because apparently it's presented there as a normal situation. So that's why education is a strong component to being there, in order to make everybody be aware of what it's a sexual harassment, what is the situation in which people can be involved. So again, I mean, we can run campaigns, we can do several things, but we alone wouldn't achieve the goal. Now, I do believe that there is potential in projects in this area, because there's from the SDG, from the development goals, okay, sustainable development goals, there is this empowerment of like child protection, education. I mean, there are several of those goals in which this particular variable, which is sexual harassment, can be connected with all of them. So we can see the picture from a different perspective, and how that could be embraced by different organizations within the country. Because if it doesn't happen within the country as a general campaign, then it won't change and it won't happen. We have numbers from one continent, we don't have from other continents. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not happening. It is happening. It's just not visible, or there is no money for projects to be published there. And there is also a conscious that we as academic have to consider as well. It's like, till what extent sometimes we speak in a language that addresses one level, and those where we write, I mean, the publications are read just by a minority and maybe not the majority. So there are several elements to study in order to have a plan how to approach that. So it's a worldwide problem, but we have to think as well, as Darlene always said, local. You think about what happens in your place with a world vision, but understanding that it's not, there's no one in which this problem is perfect. We are all facing that. And of course, I mean, sport organizations, we all should have our written statements outside there, not in minimal letters as contracts that you don't know what you're signing, yet big sign letters outside, so that everybody knows, and everybody that goes into the sport field knows what their rights are. So in that, we need cooperation from policymakers, from the ones who are in top and from the ones who provide budget, okay? Those are my comments. Thank you.
If I may, I want to ask this. There's an organization that's called the Population Council, and I think it's based in New York. But I'm wondering if they have grants or things that would pertain to that, that maybe Episcopate and our colleagues in India and Brazil and so forth could look into, to see if there is any grant funding for programs or projects. I do not know. But Amal, may I ask Amal a question? Since he's one of our representative younger persons. Amal, how does your generation feel about this issue, and how your generation, I guess, of men, how do you feel about this issue? Is it an important one to you or no?
Amal, need to unmute. this problem മനസ്സിലായോ? Do you think it's
Actually, till now we don't face any such issues, so I think it's coming down actually compared with older generation in our country, I think.
All right, so the younger men and women are getting it. They get the idea that, not a good thing to do for many reasons. Maybe that's something also that needs to be looked at. There might be a generational difference between us older folks and the younger generation to see how do they see that issue. I don't know, Rosa Dickett-Miller, what do you think about that there could be a perception of different generations about the issue of safeguarding?
Mm-hmm. We had some different experiences. On the one hand, lots of officials of sports clubs and coaches are elderly men. Normally they say we don't have it. That's no problem of us. And if there is a case, then some of them react. For example, we had a case in the volleyball federation, and there was a young man, and he was extraordinary, wonderful in reacting. He immediately did not bring the case under the table and hides it. He puts it on the agenda, started organizing experts, was starting immediately with education, with training for those who had experiences with it, with the coaches. He forced the coaches to bring this code of ethics, immediately also the criminal record, if there is anything, because afterwards they recognized that the man who had the offender was known before, but nobody told anything. So he started in creating an atmosphere where people started looking in the eyes and speaking if there is something not okay. And if it's no problem, then it's no problem to speak about it. So started creating another communication structure. And he was a young man, and the young say, if there is a problem, let's talk about it and let's do. Also, there are others who say, we are so modern, where is a problem? Everybody could talk about, we see it day by day in the media, it's no new issue. Why should this be the case in our organization? So you can't say the youngers and the olders. The olders are more restricted, that's for sure. But also young people, they're interested in sports and not always in problems. But it depends on the personalities, and I would say always the way how the heads of the organization think about the issue and what they allow to bring in participatory processes, in new structures, how an organization is organized, how professionally they work, how transparent they are in terms of coaching, in terms of deciding, decision-making positions as well. So it's, at the end, a whole system, and hopefully the younger are more open. But as there are so many discussions through Me Too, it started that also my parents, who are in the 80s, start discussing topics like this. They never spoke about sexuality or something like this, but now they start speaking about, and I think it was a very dramatic situation, but on the other hand, people got a voice speaking on issues like this, and I would say this is the first step in prevention. Speak about these issues, and if in Austria we forced our organizations to put on placards and brochures, and those who are not interested in doing it, you have to speak more with them, because if the issue is visible, it's easier to speak about. If it's not visible, then you have to have an eye on it and focus on it and try to get them speak on this issue. And young people are speaking a lot and have new ways of communicating, so I hope there is new ways for our young generations.
Thanks, Rosa, and thank you, Mal. Thanks, Darlene, for bringing this question to our youngster. Over to you, Kishore sir, for your remarks.
At the very outset, I would like to thank and congratulate Professor Rosa Muller for the wonderful session. This poet, yes, because we have touched upon a very important and sensitive issue relevant to all across the world. And many incidents have been rightly quoted which caught the public attention and the world attention. And also been touched upon the all factors, about 10 factors which are most important on the measures to be taken to curb this or prevent this, safeguard this, has been highlighted. So there is nothing left upon. But what I would like to highlight here is about a threefold approach to be done in these cases. One is at the level of the parents. Second is at the level of the child. And the third at the level of the institution and the teacher or the coach. So these three, in these threefold approaches, what is required at the level of parents is to give good moral values to the child and educate the child on what is a conduct and what is a sexual misconduct, to distinguish and differentiate between both, and also give him the confidence to desist and resist any sort of such sort of attempts which is made on to him, how to resist, how to revolt, or even how to be aggressive to face this and revolt against. Many of the times problem comes when they become submissive, and in an Indian context that is more relevant too, because the women or the ladies especially in villages and all, they attain shy away and they are not. So the parents has to in an Indian context especially have to first of all give the right moral values to the children, because they are also being tempted due to the information and drastic changes, technology is happening. They have got access to all the gadgets, which and even sometimes they get tempted with the wrong sort of ads and all. So that is what, and at the same time, the parents also need to be very careful in having a proper conversation and communication with the child. Many of the times, the child even shy away to communicate with the parents. They don't have open conversation. They don't discuss each other their own their own issues, detail, and all sort of problems they are confronting. And many of the times they are not revealing because there is no one to open up. And there are many cases where the incidents of suicides, attempts to suicides, and mental disturbance, mental imbalances happen out of their frustrations. Mm-hmm. So that is very important that parents need to be educated, child need to be. Now the second is the education, the institution and the teacher or a coach. So what is the policy? As rightly pointed out, the policy of the institution need to have a zero tolerance policy. They should not compromise at all. Zero tolerance policy towards this type of approaches, this type of issue. And the teacher or the coach also have to be you need to have a sort of fear psychosis. That they should not think that they can go scot-free and get away from this so easily, or they can. So they need to be good punitive measures, where that if you say that something wrong happens. I even remember the judgment given to the gymnastic coach by the American judge. I saw it in the video. Just so the words were so harsh, and it was telling that the judge was repeatedly telling that I don't want any child in America or elsewhere in the world to become a victim like this. So that sort of punitive measures or that sort of approach, and that is why it came to 475 years. And in case there is a fear of having in an institution for losing the job, then of course there is enough of chances, enough of probability of them being refraining from this, and that their punitive measures also are of very important. And as far as India is concerned, especially on site, when I think the question asked by Dr. Darlene was quite relevant, but I think Amal was little shy to answer that openly, and he was telling that there is. But I would like to tell that in India, last 10 years, 45 cases of sexual harassment were reported in Sai itself. Last 10 years, 45 cases, and out of which 29 out of them were filed against misconduct by the coaches. The thing is that when the teachers and the idols become the predators, trust of the institutions are lost. So that is why we have taken the sports authority have taken a stance of taken a zero tolerance policy, and 14 accused of them were found guilty and they taken out, and very serious steps are taken. And the rest few cases are still under probe, but they told that there will be zero compromise. In case something, even the minor sort of offences are reported and proved, they will not be, they will be also there, both criminal proceedings as well as service proceedings, both initiated against them. So that is how we are trying. Even then, it requires concerted efforts, and lot of all the areas they have been touched upon by Professor Rosa need to be strengthened, from policies to implementation, monitoring, and influence, and so on. So all has to be very, very effective, and each institution, each country need to have take these all 10 factors very serious. So I once again place on record our sincere appreciation to Professor Rosa Dick-Moller for the excellent presentation, and also touching up and many of the doubts being cleared. I'm sure this will definitely encourage our teachers and community coaches to take a very firm stance in these cases, and make a proactive role to curb this menace and its tentacles, which are being spread all around the world. Thank you so much, Professor Rosa. Thank you, and over to Dr.
Thank you so much, Kishore sir. It was indeed, as Rosa, I've been after you, trying to get into workshops and topics of this. And I think for the participants also, with Dr. Larry Nassar, I think there are a lot of documents, if you happen to see, literally one starts weeping after seeing a series of these. I think our PE teachers should see those. I too got emotional so much, and one of the biggest problem with us is our children don't speak up. I'm talking from the Indian context, but you need to have a courage to speak up. So I was trying, not like this. Maybe I don't say speak up in this, in general to speak up. Let it not be related to anything. Like I wanted the girls to speak up, so I thought, no, why don't we have something? So, but many a time, there's a fear, maybe in the coaches or the parents, that how it will turn out to be. That's the biggest challenge comes in. So many of them, they say you don't see the future of them. But I would like to tell you, like in terms of our institution, we are very lucky to have Dr. Kishore sir, because even there's a mildest of thing also, things are, and I see to it that it's brought to him, and he makes it a point of getting some sort of an action done. So I find it's a very safe, and we try motivating our children to speak up. But I think our girls are a bit submissive, as so rightly pointed out. It varies from state to state. But as you said, the right upbringing, and why you thought for some gymnastics, because it was an Olympic medal producing factory. So many a time, as you rightly pointed out, that's what happens. But I think it's time that we need to get in, and as Rosa also was telling, at least from each country, and I mean, something has to be done, and because it's the need of the hour, and we can save, it's not only girls and boys, we can save children. As is, that's very important. And I think each coaches, like the doctors, get an oath or a certification that they would not indulge it in anything. Such sort of a thing should be in our coaches and PE teachers also. I think that policy decision, if it comes in, there can be definitely a change. This is what I feel, but I think that's required. And thank you so much, Rosa, because I think this is something which is emotional, because as you said, it's only when the affected person, because whenever we give a talk to our athletes, they don't consider this is important, because they find, oh, like, it's nothing's going to happen to me. So many times ignorance cannot be considered an excuse. That's what's happening today with us, because that's what we're trying to find ways and means. But I find in such cases our principal, especially Dr. G. Kishore, is the one interacting with the children, asking them to be free, speaking up. But then still there is inhibition. Something is there which is not allowing them to come out. So I think that's, but definitely there can be changes which is possible. And I'm sure, as our president rightly pointed out, but I think we could do a lot because you're fighting for gender. It's equivalent with the boys and girls too, as you said, rightly pointed out. So on behalf of the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, Government of India, Khelo India, Rosa Dickelman, thank you so much for having spent your valuable time. And I said, these are life lessons for us. I don't think it's just a lecture session. So that's the reason why our PE teachers and all of us keep listening to it, because it adds, and then there is something in us, some spark. Let's do something. That's how it originates. Thank you so much, on Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, Government of India, Khelo India. A big thank you and hats off to you. And we look forward, because now IOC has come out with a certification on safeguarding. So from 2021, I was just saying there's a certification coming in. So I'm sure that they should be safeguarding officers too, by which it's not just, I think a very important thing is not just for a course that a person takes in, unless, as Beatrice rightly pointed out, if we can bring in something into action, then it is more meaningful. So I think being silent doesn't work. So when we see something, it has to be more active. So Rosa, thank you so much. And looking forward to further workshops, because I feel in workshop it should be practical, because I saw in one of the workshop I heard where a person is asked to keep the hand onto another person's thigh. They says, when you can't tolerate this even for a fraction of a second, how do you feel it? So that's how it happens. So I think let us do something where we can get people experience in a workshop. Thank you so much, Professor Rosa, for your wonderful session and a very important session. Thank you.
Thank you to all the audience for listening and thinking with me, and thanks to India for organizing this outstanding seminar and reaching so many people for our contents and issues we have. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, darling, because I said this, that's what makes it so special, because you come out with those tips and points, and you try to pick up things by which we can take further steps. That's what you show us, the path. Thank you so much for doing that. And you took it light, Amal too, but I'm sure Amal is excited and is getting smarter day by day. Thank you so much, darling, for this. And I thank Beatrice. Thank you so much for the manifesto, because Victor has said us, and LNCP is going to join the manifesto for, like you moved Sao Paulo, let us move India. So we'll sign that manifesto too. So I'll put it in and then we'll be a part of it. Thank you so much, Beatrice, for introducing us to such a mission.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa, because I always say, Rosa, a very powerful lady president of the Pascaway. I think it should not be Pascaway alone. It should be something still more important where you take up that, because everybody believes that you have the power and the spirit and the strength to drive. So you're the driving force.